Welcome to the Better Than Rich Show with your hosts, Andrew Biggs and Mike Abramowitz. The Better Than Rich Show helps ambitious leaders who are on a mission to leave the world better than they found it, change their perspective on what's important, increase their income and impact, and systemize their life and business. If you've ever struggled with finding your purpose, have felt disconnected or distracted, or found yourself going through the motions, this show will remind you that what you do matters and will re-inspire you to chase your highest dreams. It's time for you to become better than rich.
Hello and welcome to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host, Andrew Biggs, and I'm here with my host, Mike Abramowitz. Mike, how are we doing today?
It's always a great day, Andrew. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive into today's topic, how to lead through change. I think it's such an important topic, such a timely topic, considering just how fast-paced our world is moving, just how much certain decisions that are being made across the nation could affect how you operate in your business. So it's going to be fun to break that down. Before we do, though, man, I'm going to hit you out of the blue. How you been? Give me the scoop. I know people love our business content, but they also just love to hear about how's life, what's been moving and shaking in your world, man. Give me the scoop there.
Yeah, things are really good. I've been home with James now since September, and we just went to the zoo for the first time a couple weeks ago, and then the aquarium, and then we were able to go to the zoo again, and it went really well this past weekend. So that's been really nice to, see him progress, and we're starting to do some taste testing with him, and because he just turned 1, but his actual due date isn't until April, so he's still adjusted, so he's not quite 1 year old yet, but
right.
Yeah, so it's been really fun for him, and business is good. We finished off January inside Vector, number 4 in the nation, over 100,000 in sales for the year so far for the month of January. Have 8 awesome clients that I'm coaching directly and working with. The accountability group is doing well, and it's been really fun, just kind of serving and getting acclimated to what my genius is and how to leverage that genius to help the marketplace. So it's been a really great last several months for sure.
Absolutely, and to be able to do that all right and manage the household. So thanks for just giving me the scoop and being willing to share kind of how things are going for you. Awesome, man. Well, for me, well, we got the baby. We have Gabriel, who's now 2 months old. So that's really exciting. He's 2 months at this point, and he's just rocking and rolling. I actually just had a meeting with our midwife, and we were discussing, him and how he's doing. He's doing great. And then, we're rocking and roll with the business, obviously getting going with our Tampa event that we really can't wait for. Mike and I, just so you guys know, put together the agenda for that event. It's pretty much finalized at this point. And it's going to be a world-class event. We can't wait to be there and to rock people's worlds. So that's really exciting. And then, we're just navigating what is it like to be a father of 2 is a new question for me. And it's a fun question. And it's fun to kind of coach Elijah as well on how to be a big brother. So that's a whole new challenge as well. So something for you to look forward to potentially. We'll see. But getting into today's topic around navigating change, how to lead through change. Change management is a topic. You can go take a course, in business school on change management. It's something that as a business owner, you need to know how to do it. And there's right and wrong ways to do it. And so I would love to maybe ask you as a starting off point, how do you go about thinking about change management? And when you think about the beginning of the problem, what comes up for you as a starting point?
Anytime, specifically to a business, anytime change exists in business or in life, people actually like change. Change is not a bad thing. In fact, people enjoy the outcome of change. But what I have found is they hate transition. So the transition between where they are and the actual change that's going to take place, that gap called transition is not as enjoyable. So what I've really discovered, and I know we'll kind of jam on, is really how to navigate through transition into change is what I have found is really what requires the most attention, because some people, if there's any type of change we're going to put into place, they're going to be like, oh, here's Mike again trying to do another new thing. Is this really going to stick, or is it a fad? And you got to, so you have to offset some of those curiosities or concerns from somebody saying, oh, it's another diet to change. Here's another policy they're trying to put in place. We'll see how long this one lasts. So, you got to kind of navigate through that during that transition. And that's where the reinforcement and the follow-up and, the documentation, all the stuff that we're about to jam on, that's where a lot of that shows up. So that's my starting point usually, is like thinking about what is going through their mind through the transition phase, and how do we address those concerns or curiosities.
Right. And I love the way you frame that as people like change. They like the ultimate outcome of once the change is ultimately implemented, because, let's face it, you wouldn't be putting a change in place if we didn't think it was going to be good for them, if we didn't think it'd be good for the business. And so we're putting a change in place that we know is going to get the business and the team where we want them to be. But that transition period of, well, I'm so used to this. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Or whatever the story is, well, I don't want to learn this whole new thing. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take some getting used to. Maybe there's even some costs, some opportunity costs in the meantime while you're actually learning a new system or implementing a new program. And so people don't like that transition period. And I love the way that you put that. People like change, but they hate transition. When I was thinking about this a little bit, there's really two types of change ultimately, gang, that you are going to want to be implementing in your business. And I mean, the first one is kind of like small incremental changes. And this is when you already have a system in place, you already have something that's working inside a program, but ultimately it's not working to its fullest capacity. And those are quick hitting. Those are easy. It's kind of like a quick update, a little memo here, a little email there, a little chat, message here, a mention in a team meeting followed by an email or something like that, where you're providing new information on policies, procedures, maybe introducing a new technology, but it's ultimately not going to radically change someone's day-to-day operations. And then there's other changes that you make that are wholesale changes. It's a complete, 180 from what you've been doing in the past. So when you make those sorts of changes, there's different types of considerations that you need to bring in. Namely, what you need to do is you need to make sure, right, that everyone understands the full scope of what's happening. You need to give yourself a lot more time for that change to kind of stick and be taken on and fully adopted. And it's a whole different question when you're working with these sort of large scale wholesale changes. Mike, especially starting, I would say probably around 2019, 2020, I noticed you start to implement some really cool strategies in your business. I'd love for you to open up about some of the strategies you've implemented, whether it was on the wholesale side or the quick hitting side, that ultimately was allowed your business to navigate some really turbulent times really elegantly. What would you say there?
There's so many, and I'll just kind of rattle them off in no particular order, but, navigating into a live in-person training seminar and transitioning into a Zoom training seminar, how to navigate through an in-person live demonstration and navigating into a virtual Zoom presentation. So those are two. And then navigating through leading like a conference meeting of like making like big phone jams and booking up appointments together as a community and moving those over into the virtual climate. Now, we were kind of equipped for some of those, but the small little modifications were, how do we communicate these to these individuals, the same expectations and standards that we want for them that we had in live, but also now we're going to do in the virtual climate. And a couple of other changes that we're now currently putting into place is like some a little bit larger scaled text, like a text to schedule option for booking up clients for appointments versus old fashioned pick up the phone, write it in the calendar. So some sort of automation text to schedule option for booking up appointments. We're also navigating through a different an onboarding process from the interview until their training, and having how to document their progress through their onboarding videos before they get to the seminar. So that way we're able to influence the user outside of the live session. and it's taking them through like an onboarding series before they even get to the live session. This is something that's so powerful. And where this came from is I was talking to a real estate agent building his downline, and he's looking to build his downline. He's like, the challenge with building my downline is it just takes so much time to train them. I said, well, what if there was a video series that they went through before they got to you? The end result of the training is you shadow me. But before they get to you and arrange the time to shadow you, you already have them equipped and prepped with some of the small nuances or large nuances that you want them to be trained on before they observe you do an actual sale. And that was like, wow, okay, we need to put some of that stuff into place to simplify the training process and make the user experience better for the trainer and also for the user, so they could feel more confident coming into their training. So these are just a couple, no particular order, some big changes, small changes that we put into place.
Awesome. And I think about, the natural progression of you going through the design phase, which is something we've covered on previous podcasts. If you haven't had a chance to listen to those, make sure you go back. Episodes 7, 10, 11, 12 are really good for that. But if you haven't had a chance to do that. But it's kind of the natural progression of you redesigning the different systems in your business is change, right? We are ultimately designing something so that we can change it, change the way things are currently operating. And so this is just the next step in a lot of ways. It is how to actually implement and effectuate the change instead of just thinking about it, right? Because it's kind of fun to sit back and think about it and say, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool if they got a text? Wouldn't it be cool if people just popped on my calendar? Wouldn't it be cool if every single time I did this automatically happened? Those are fun things to think about. But what about actually getting adoption from your team and then actually having it implemented and watching it run and working out the kinks and all of those things? So these are just some things that come up for me, is that it's just the natural progression. One thing I like to go ahead.
To your point, having these consistent meetings and like I need to be on top of collecting the data that's necessary. So therefore, I need to figure out what is the data necessary for us to collect before I could manage the data collection. So I have to, in the design phase, thinking, okay, how do we know if this is working? How do we know if the change is actually a beneficial change? And, so there's been times in my career, I especially fall of 2020, we went into this really awesome policy process program. And then about 6 weeks in, I'm like, this is not working. It's not effective.
Yeah.
We got all this data and I'm like, we got to retreat back a little bit. And it was interesting to be able to see that. But if I didn't have the data, if I didn't reinforce that, I wouldn't have known that it's not working. It's not producing, profits and progress in the organization.
Cool. So a couple things I want to double click on just to circle back so it's not missed for the audience here listening. Again, if you're listening to this, these are some things to write down. One is you do your homework first and you dot your I's and you cross your T's before you introduce anything to your team. So often I see people, what they're doing is, oh, I got a really cool idea. I just had a call with my coach. And then guess what they do? 30 minutes later, they're on the phone with their top ranking official or whatever, their second in command. They're like, we're going to change this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And the person's just like, whoa. Where's this coming from? Right? This is out of the blue. This is totally different. This is way too much for me to handle right now. I'm literally in the middle of another meeting and I'm handling this, I'm handling that. And there's 60 different things that you didn't think about before you presented it to someone else. Now, you might say, well, Andrew, that's moving too slow. Well, I'm not saying move slow, but I am saying move at a measured pace, move at a pace that's appropriate for your business. And, some businesses are more speedboats, but others are, a little larger, maybe a pontoon or a yacht. And some are like, massive cruise ships or the Titanic. And so you need to be thoughtful about how you implement this change. So dot your I's and cross your T's. Number 2 is consistent meetings, right? Mike mentioned. Making sure that each department has consistent meetings so that you can check in to see, is the change working? You can get get sort of like qualitative feedback from your team on that, right? That's what those meetings are for, so that your team can report back how things are actually feeling, how things are implementing, some concerns that they might have about a particular change. So those consistent meetings are useful for that. And then he's also capturing data. So he's getting quantitative data, and he's using a qualitative and quantitative approach in order to figure out, is this change actually working or not? So those are just a few different points that came up for me that I wanted to make sure didn't get skipped. Mike, what comes up for you there?
In the meetings, I just wanted to make sure it was captured. We have an all hands meeting. So it's like all the department managers on one meeting where they do report outs of like what we call is start, stop, and keep is often. So at the end of every meeting, they do a start, stop, and keep. What do they need to start doing that's not currently happening? What do they need to stop doing that is currently a distraction or not working? And what do they need to keep doing that is working? So at the end of each meeting, we get that. So then we start at each meeting where they do a report out. Hey, how did your start, stop, and keep from last week go? And then they'll do like a report out as far as that goes. Then we'll have our meeting. And then during that meeting, on the all hands meeting, we just give updates on the different departments. Hey, this is what we're noticing in each department. Why would it be important for the sales department to know about what's happening in the recruiting department, as an example? Well, the user goes through all of the departments. So I want to make sure that the departments on the front end of the process know what's happening on the back end and vice versa, so they can just be consistent and congruent. Now, that meeting's only an hour. It's a very short meeting. But then also we have a specific department meeting with anyone who's relevant to that department, where we spend about 45 minutes to an hour just solely on that department, and picking apart what is actually needed. What are the holes in the ships? What are those start, stop, and keeps? And bringing more attention to those.
Awesome. And again, this level of detail, is probably more than most of y'all are doing. So if you're not doing these things, definitely make sure you're implementing them sooner rather than later. One thing that comes up for me when I'm implementing change, when any business is implementing change, is kind of like almost like a rollout period, right? There's that transition, and you need to be thoughtful about what is that transitionary period. What does it look like? I like to call it a ramp, right? So we're basically ramping towards a new program, but that ramp might actually take some time. Some changes, those quick hitting ones, happen overnight, and we're going to talk about that too. But these larger changes, maybe you're implementing it over the course of 90 days or at least 3 weeks, or, maybe it's 6 months to fully move through a new program. And so if you're putting a new plan in place, you've got to make sure you understand the ramp. And then there's milestones for different periods of the ramp. So you understand, here's what our ideal scenario is. I'd love for this change to take place over the next 3 weeks. In the meantime, we're going to be testing things out. I want a lot of feedback. I'm going to give you a lot more grace about making mistakes, because I know this is new. You're just getting used to it. But by the end of this 90 days or 3 weeks or however long that ramp period is, I need to know that everyone's in line with the new rules, the new policies, procedures, and technologies. Along with that, sometimes you kind of have to take one bite of the apple at a time. And so maybe you're actually only implementing part of the program to start, just to make sure people aren't overwhelmed. And then you're going to introduce another part, next week, and then another part the week after that. And so we're going to slowly over time move this ship in the right direction. A lot of times, kind of like when, a person wants to come up with New Year's resolutions, right, Mike? And they sit down, they're like, well, I'm going to work out, 6 days a week. I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to spend this much time with my family. I'm going to only take cold showers. And it's just like, wow, you weren't doing any of these things, and now you're going to do 17 different things every single day, huh? I don't know if that's really going to work for you. You might want to rethink that strategy. And the same thing can be applied to a business, where it's like you're trying to change so many things overnight. Your people are confused as hell, to be honest, right? They're just like, I don't know which way is up. I don't know which way is down. Everything that Mike taught us to start is no longer true. And I'll be honest, those job ads that I keep getting, asked about on LinkedIn, they're starting to look a little bit more enticing. And I don't really know if I want to stay here. So that's what comes up for me in terms of like ramping and then not overwhelming people. Mike, what comes up for you?
And that confusion brings chaos, and that's what you want to avoid. So there are these touch points. This constant communication is really important. I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to say what I want to say, but I want you to answer. It's like, how do you know they're qualified at each of those benchmarks? So I want you to marinate on that question. But one of the things that I think about is promoting and telling them this is the desired outcome. This is the big picture of what the end result looks like. They need to be reminded of what is that end result consistently. So it's like, this is what we're getting towards. And then it's like, this is the MVP, the minimum viable product that we want to make sure, because this minimum viable product that we get done will still create positive change in the organization that will move us closer. So like the MVP on each of those benchmarks or each of those milestones. So how do you like know if your staff or these individuals are actually like capable of doing or like actually incorporating some of this change, or they've learned the skills necessary for the change, or they're following through on that change? What shows up for you on that one? I'm curious.
Yeah, totally. So two things come up. One is having some sort of certification process, right? Too often this change management is a little too informal. And don't get me wrong, if it's like you and one other person and that's how you run your business, maybe you don't need to like, okay, now I'm going to quiz you on all the changes and I need you to fill out this test that I made on Google Forms or something. If you don't get at least an 85%, like I'm firing you tomorrow. I'm not saying you have to get like that. But especially if you're trying to scale and you're trying to make changes at scale, when you do that, actually kind of testing or certifying someone or recertifying them, I kind of think about it like a financial planner or an accountant who has to keep their licenses up to date, or a real estate agent. You have to go to these continue education classes and stuff to make sure that you're always up to date on the latest laws or the latest updates to the penal code or whatever it is that you do. That's very formal. If you're in the insurance space, you got to keep your licenses up. And so, people should be keeping their licenses up for your internal operations, right? How well do they actually know the policies and procedures that in terms of like the if-then statements and the rules of how your organization runs? Or are they kind of flying by the seat of their pants? Or did they learn really well, when they started 3 years ago, but now, their certification is outdated. So you might want to think about that. Just as an example, when we used to run the mobile gaming support for Clash of Clans, and Supercell is the publisher, but all their games, basically, we ran all their support. So we had about 400 people or so just on their project. So when they changed the policy, we had to get that information out to 400 people, right? Of course, we can send an email. We can shoot a chat in Slack or Teams or WhatsApp or whatever the communication tool of choice is. But how do you actually know that those 400 people, A, even opened the email and read it, and then B, actually understood what it said and are actually implementing it? And so the only way to do that is to have continued certification that comes on from time to time, especially when there's wholesale changes that are made. The second thing is just you continuing to reinforce things and kind of like be the cop, right? You kind of have to have some enforcement and you have to check in, especially early on, so that people know you mean business, right? And when I make a change, I'm going to be kind of a little bit of a jackass to people, and I'm going to be like, hey, we just changed this. I know it's new, but you need to get it right. And I'm going to be a little bit more anal retentive about are they actually following it, until I'm confident they are. And then maybe I'll, ease back a little bit and turn my attention elsewhere. So those two things come up for me. What are your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're navigating through, like I said, a couple of these changes. And at one of the department meetings this week specifically, I called a role play. I was like, all right.
Oh, you put him on the spot, huh?
I put him right on the spot. I said, you have a couple of these conversations tomorrow. Let me hear how you are having those conversations. Go ahead and pull up your outline, and I'm just going to be a fly on the wall. You talk to Jess, and just kind of let me hear. And it was a good quality control. It was a good quality control. Number one, for her to find, she had to find the outline. It wasn't like just on the browsers. I was like, oh, okay, so it's not something that she might have been using all the time, right? And then through the conversation of role play, what does this show? This shows that, number one, I'm in the know of what she knows. Number two, I didn't reprimand her at all. I took responsibility for it, and I said, I apologize. I apologize that this was confusing, that this wasn't clearly laid out. So let's clearly lay it out, so that way, if I do a quality control in the future, there's no confusion at all. So we put a whole new policy and document together and typed everything out. I said, how do you feel about this going into tomorrow? It's like, oh, I feel so much better. It's like, great. We'll follow up next week. We'll see how those go. And also send me some updates on WhatsApp after each of those conversations. Another example for one of the other departments, I said, what is the policy if we're going to excuse someone or accept someone? Do we have that in writing somewhere? We might. It's like, cool. Let's make sure that's in writing. So next time I never have to reprimand. I never want to reprimand the person. I want to reprimand the policy or refer back to the policy. So if something's not getting done, it's like, it's in writing. So we went through, we created a document, and it's in writing. I said, is there any questions on this? Again, I apologize for any confusion that was put into place. Is there any confusion moving forward? No, this is cool. We'll refer back to this each week just to make sure we're on the same page. And now we have it in a document, and then we sent it also to our communication channel in WhatsApp. And then at one point, maybe in the next few days, I might just say, thank you so much for helping us navigate through these changes in our organization. It's for the betterment of our organization. This is what we're building towards. Thank you so much. This is going to create positive change beyond you. I want you here forever, but there's a chance you might not be here forever. So the legacy, a lineage that you're going to leave behind is going to be felt when you're not here. So thank you so much for taking this seriously and bringing that into the conversation. Again, leading with the end in mind, bringing it to the present, and managing them through that ramp like you were talking about.
Right. And you mentioned something that I think is vastly overlooked in a lot of small businesses, and even in many medium-sized businesses. I think large businesses kind of get this right. But you mentioned getting things in writing. Why in writing? I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but can you just circle back and make sure people really understand, why do these changes need to be documented and in writing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, things change all the time. So if things are changing and things are getting thrown at them all the time, it's like, we got to make sure we're referring back to something that is tangible. It's not a feeling. Feelings are fleeting. We have to have something that's tangible to refer back to. Because if we're saying, oh, I think we talked about it once in that conversation a while ago, it's like, which conversation a while ago? We've had a lot of those. So it's like, and that's partially, by the way, one of the things navigating through change. Every conversation, these start, stop, and keeps, I have them document them, and they post those in the chat for that reason. So it's like, hey, you wrote this. You saw this, right? Like, you said you were going to start this. You said you were going to stop this. So that's one little nugget there of why start, stop, and keep. Documenting those is a really good idea. And what we do with those is they put it in the chat, and then I have my VA just take them from the chat and put them onto a spreadsheet with the date. So it's very easy to see. It's like, these are your start, stop, and keeps from this date. So it makes it really organized. Awesome. It would probably even be better if they filled out a Google form with their start, stop, keep, and it's auto-populated. But I just thought of that right now.
You haven't gotten that far yet, and that's what's beautiful about systems, is you can always kind of make them better. And also, you got to start somewhere, right? And so it's that fine balance between what is the MVP and then what's the optimal, and how do you kind of given the time constraints in whether it's time constraints or money constraints or whatever, resource constraints. How do you come up with something that really works today, but it could also be better tomorrow? So I love that. And I'll tell you what, I mean, if you're listening, I think just that idea of making sure everything is documented all the time is worth the price of admission, because it's just so important. And how often have we had conversations with folks, and maybe we come to an agreement, we come to a conclusion. It's like, okay, this is the new direction we're going to go in, gang. And here's the update, and I'm excited, you're excited, here we go, right? But it's not really captured in writing, right? It's not really recorded anywhere. And ultimately what happens is, a few weeks go by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 18 weeks. And then it's like, you look up and it's not being implemented, and you're like, why isn't it being implemented? And someone's like, I don't know. I don't remember that conversation. I don't remember us changing that. Okay, well, I do. Well, when? I don't know. It was sometime back in November ish, it's like, well, did you follow it up with an email? Did you follow it up with some sort of written communication? I mean, this is especially important. when you're trying to manage team and like standards, expectations, follow through, topics of compensation, right? I've had people get communicated with from their boss, right? And probably they've done this to their subordinates, but their boss will say, yeah, I think we're going to promote you probably like in January or something, right? And they're like, oh, cool, I'm getting promoted in January. They'll come to me, I'm getting promoted in January. It's going to be super cool. And then guess what happens come January? Well, the goalposts get moved, right? And it's like, it was never recorded in writing. And they're like, yeah, well, we kind of talked about, I said I was maybe going to promote you. Maybe you might earn a promotion, but that was just like conjecture. We were just kind of shooting the shit, right? I don't think we're really going to be able to promote you till August, to be honest. You got some more proving to do. And so all of these things matter. And, that's even like a lesson on how to coach up, right? And manage your team through change. Internally, even people that lead you. But these are just points that happen all the time in business because people aren't getting things in writing. It's just such a simple lesson.
Yeah. And there's a couple of really good technologies that are out there. I'm sure, you as audience can share a bunch with us, but, we've alluded to like Google Forms and WhatsApp and Slack and whatnot. There's one that is fairly new, introduced to me, is called Session Lab. And oftentimes, if you're running a training and you need to create a change on the fly, and there's like a change to the schedule, for example, and you need to communicate that change immediately. What's nice about Session Lab is you just put the agenda in there, and if you need to move, like if you're ahead of schedule or behind schedule, and so it needs to be a real quick, rapid change, you could just drag and drop and move the schedule around, and it's real time where everyone else that's like not necessarily in the meeting, they can just go to Session Lab and just see that you created some change with the agenda, and you don't have to do a report out. You don't have to send a message. All you could just send is trigger, hey, check Session Lab. There was a change, and then they could see exactly what the change is as an example. So even if there's a lot of technologies out there that can support, navigating through a lot of this change as well. I'm sure there's a bunch out there that others know about, but that's just one I wanted to share.
Totally. And I've never heard of Session Lab, and it sounds awesome. And I think there's just so many things like that. And the way you want to be thinking is, how can we make sure everyone's looking at the same thing at the same time? And especially with, most of our teams these days are remote, right? I think there's very few people here listening where it's like every single day, our entire team comes to the same physical location. And so it just requires that people working remote get updated in real time. So we have to have some sort of shared place, right? That's the whole idea of having like a drive, whether it's like an iCloud drive or a Google Drive. Google Docs update in real time, right? And that's why those are so useful, because if you make a change in Florida, I'm going to see it here in Arkansas. And the same thing is true for, any other sort of platform like a CRM or something like that. We need changes to be able to happen in real time and for us to be able to see them. And if we're all working on different versions of the software or different versions of the document, we're working on outdated things, right? So I'll be honest, like, using real Excel, using real Microsoft Word these days, like when someone sends me like a real file, I'm kind of like, what is this, man? Like it's just kind of outdated. I know Microsoft has created their own versions of those, like in the cloud, that to compete with Google Docs and stuff. So if you want to do that, great. But just working on an old-fashioned Excel file on your own computer, I think it's really, really dangerous. Working on your own Microsoft Word project on your own computer, it's really, really dangerous because you're going to have a version, you're going to email it to your business partner or something like that. They're going to have that old version. You're going to make some edits and they're not going to see them. So no matter what, the philosophy behind all of this is we all need to be working on the same tools at the same time. And then the other thing around technology is just you do need some sort of quick hitting chat, ability. Or you could use email if it's a little bit more old school in terms of how you operate, and you're confident that everyone's going to check it. But these chat tools like Slack, Discord, WhatsApp, there's a number of them out there. Obviously, Microsoft Teams, but you need some sort of quick hitting chat function so that in real time, if you do make a change, there could be a communication back and forth to make sure people are aware of it. So that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, I think everyone that's listening to this right now, if you go back and just just think about all the technologies that Andrew just said and say, how can I incorporate some of these into my business? Even if you're not going to change something right away, but it's like, how can I just make it a little bit better for the user? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to get accomplished. We want to make it better for the user internally and also better for the user externally. And what's nice is what works internally, you could often bring to your external users as well and offer them value of things that they maybe don't know how to use. And we do that all the time. So it's like for us internally recruiting, text to schedule, that's where the idea said, oh, let's help our external users start using text to schedule because this is really efficient on the internal side. Let's use that on the external side too for our sales reps or also our clients. So just something to keep in mind. There's a lot of really great tools. And I'm looking at my notes. All my boxes have been checked. And I'm really glad that we made time for this topic. I don't know if there's anything else specific that we might have missed on this topic of creating change or helping people navigate through change.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will just share there on the topic of technologies is, CRMs, whether it's, HubSpot, Salesforce, ActiveCampaign, Infusionsoft, Zendesk, there's all sorts of different CRM platforms. If you have some questions on that, don't hesitate to shoot us a DM or something. But you kind of need one, right? It's the reality. And there's just so many companies that just, don't have all of their customers in one place. Or maybe they've outsourced that to some other department or whatever. And, it's going to hurt you. If it doesn't hurt you now, it's definitely going to hurt you later because you didn't capture all this information about your customers or your prospects. So, while we're just on that topic, it's super important that you get that, buttoned up and that you have something as a repository, even if it's just a repository for contact information and personal details. So, hey, this was super fun. I really enjoyed it. And I hope all of you listening got a ton of value out of today on this topic about navigating through change in your business. If you have any questions, obviously let us know. Also make sure that you follow us on Instagram. I'm Andrew M. Biggs at Instagram. Mike, what's your handle on Instagram again?
At Mike Abramowitz.
At Mike Abramowitz. Nice and easy. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us again. And remember to leave today better than you found it. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at betterthan_rich and join our Facebook group at the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, leave today better than you found it.